But now we're in the midst of losers. And you go from the penthouse to the outhouse literally overnight. And it keeps you up at night going, what could I have done differently?
Welcome to the Business Growth Masterclass, where business growth is made simple. I'm your host, Albert Gillespie.
And I'm your co-host, Kellen Ketchersid. Join us as we bring you stories from business leaders so you can learn from their wins, their losses, and everything in between.
All right. Today's guest is the founder and CEO of Quext and the founder and partner at Madera Residential, two very different businesses, but still related. One is a technology company and the other is a real estate investment firm. Without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Mr. Dave Marcinkowski.
Hey, Albert, thank you. Thanks, Colin. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, thanks for being here today.
I have been excited about this one. I feel like I say that on every episode, but I really mean it this time. You have always been like an entrepreneur's entrepreneur to me. And I've always thought of you in that way. And I can't imagine, a time when you worked for someone else that you weren't building your own thing. And so I really want to start kind of at the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey. Do you have, a moment or a story you can tell where you really discovered you were meant to build your own thing?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it's not really one moment in time. In fact, it was a journey. Working for other people, and even in roles where you're in the hierarchical chain, I always found myself challenging the norm. Like, why do we do it that way? That doesn't make any sense. Can't we do this? Can't we do that?
Well, everybody loves that.
Yeah. And well, no, I mean, there's lots of like groups I worked for. I've been blessed. I worked for groups that were very supportive.
Good.
Early on, I worked for a company, great company, but this is how we do it. This is how we're always going to do it. And that's just how it's going to be. And, in that company, I just couldn't thrive and I was miserable. Didn't really know why. I had a lot of excuses, but I think it was just not a good fit. And then I worked for a company that, for the most part, let me challenge the norm, and I got to do a lot of things. I was their head of training first. So I was training everybody on everything, in real estate. And you're going out and you're talking to somebody and I'm training them on, and they're like, well, these are experts I'm talking to, and I'm the layman trying to put it in words so I could train other people on it and create manuals and videos and things around it. And so then people started challenging like basic fundamental apartment operations. And then that got me really geeked up because I'd get, we got to go do something about that. And then, my company would let me go so far, but not all the way. And then I came to work for Madera, and I got into a position where I go from being an employee to being a partner. And man, it took me a while to figure that out.
Because you were just so used to working for someone else?
I think it was it was, okay, now when I make this decision, if it doesn't go well, I'm the one who's paying the piper on that to some degree. I've got to convince my other partners I got to do these things. And I had success, reinventing operations, processes. And Madera, we were blessed. Well, we started off really rough, and then we kind of worked through that, and we got into having success. And that's really where I learned that I was an entrepreneur, was then. So I didn't grow up with much. I grew up with very little. And, I can look back and say, kind of crawl, walk, run, getting to a point where I actually was like, there's actually money in my bank account.
Yeah.
And it took me probably 25 years to get to that point of crawl, walk, run. And then I get to this point where now all of a sudden I experience success, both financially, but professionally. And I went through this really dark phase in my life of, who am I to be successful? And it forced me to then get into counseling. I actually used to go counseling about a half mile from here, from your offices. And it started, I'd go to counseling, 2 to 3 times a week.
So when was this in the story? Was this
This
when
was
you were
probably about 10 to 12 years ago, probably 12 years ago.
Okay. So after you had been a co-founder at Madera.
Yeah. And so Madera starts having success. I start going through an identity crisis. I was just miserable, and I was trying to be like, then you start having success and you're like, well, what is success? Like, how am I supposed to look? So I'm starting to act like I'm somebody because I've had some success, which didn't feel good either. I was wearing a different version of me that just wasn't me. But I didn't know any better. So I was just kind of going through life and being miserable. Thank God I'm married to an incredible woman who can kind of smack you around when you're being an idiot. And, we'd led to, her really challenging me on some things. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. It just is weird. And decided to go to counseling, had an incredible counselor. And I'd spend like an hour with him just kind of puking out of the mouth the things that were going through my head at the time. And he would slowly start to help me sort those things out. And it was an identity crisis. I didn't know who I was. And so, as God does, he opens up some doors where I got introduced to some people who were technology entrepreneurs, or I got involved with Peter Diamandis and the Abundance 360 group around this period of time. And I got surrounded by, wasn't intentionally doing it, these really strong tech entrepreneurs. And what I saw was like an easy way to connect the dots. And I was passionate about it. This was something that I wanted to do. I really felt that was the door that God was opening. So you have this really long journey to get to this point where I think I was always that, but I was conforming to wherever I was, the best that I could, and really growing up, I think, as a part of that and getting mature, till you get to a point where you kind of go down into the abyss for a little while, and you have to sort through what you're happening. And then you come back out the other end. You're like, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur. Wow. I like to invent things.
Oh, okay. I need to stop you. We've never gotten into kind of the identity stuff, and I really want to get into that. But before we get there, let's take a step back. You grew up around Michigan, and early part of your career after graduating, you were in accounting. Is that right?
Yeah.
Of a real estate company. Set the table a little bit. What were you doing before Madera, and what is Madera? What do you guys do?
Yeah. So I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I wasn't much of a student in high school, and probably didn't have a lot of choices of going to school. I was a decent basketball player, and I got the opportunity to play small Division III basketball. So I got offered one offer at a really good school, but small Division III, and I got offered to go play at a junior college. And I took the job to go to the small school, which was a great decision. I got a really good education. Again, I wasn't a great student. I was, my kids here, I've told them this already. I was probably a 2.6, 2.7 student in high school and in college. And it's funny, I look back now and I truly believe it was more like, I think I'm plenty smart enough. It was just, I didn't have my act together back then. So I get out of school with a 2.7. You're not like, people aren't throwing jobs at you. I was caddying at a country club from the time I was 11 until I was 22, which honestly was probably some of the best education I ever had, was spending 4 hours at a time on a golf course with successful people. There's no better way of learning in that scenario. And so I had this desire to become a professional caddy, chased that a little bit and kind of ran out of time, needed a job, went to work for a temp agency, got placed as a bookkeeper at Ed Rose & Sons in Detroit, which is a fairly large apartment management company. And,
it was fate.
It was fate. Yeah. I mean, it was really kind of funny. Lots of funny stories. Like I can tell you my first day in the job was collecting rent and calling residents who didn't pay their rent and certain things like that. So like when people are like, well, you don't really know what it's like to walk in my, I was like, yeah, I've pretty much walked in everybody's shoes at some point in time in my career. So ran out of time. I just was never, I don't know how to say it. Like the funny story about Ed Rose was, back then we had one computer in the office, and it was used for sending demand notices out. Everything else was manual. So like, I'm really good with a 10 key. I'd have to like create manual rent rolls. That was majority of my time, and deal with sodas and different things like that. But got to a point where that wasn't going to work. God opened up, another really long story, but I know we don't have a ton of time, but God opens this door. Cool thing about that one was, same deal. I was miserable. I was working 67 hours a week. I was getting overtime, so I was paying off things. I was making a little bit of money, but it was still check to check guy.
Yeah.
And I'm driving, and I was complaining to my friends, I complaining to my family. I'm just miserable. I hate this job. And in all honesty, I didn't really hate the job. I didn't, it wasn't, I liked the people. I liked everything about it. I just felt like I was not where I was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I was driving to work one day. It's a true story. I was driving on 696 in Detroit, Michigan. I was going under the Telegraph Road overpass. And I was like, from the time I was driving to Telegraph Road, which I had like 10 miles on a highway, let's say Telegraph's the 5-mile mark. I'm sitting there in my head just stewing on how miserable I am. I hit Telegraph and just something comes over me like, it's time to move on.
Wow.
And I walked into the office that day and I quit. And I had the most incredible piece about it. And so God opens up this incredible series of doors. And 3 weeks later, I was in Chicago working for Marquette Management. And I started off as their director of training. True story, I lied my way into that job. They were rolling out Yardi Property Management back in 1995.
Oh boy.
Okay. And
Okay.
this was like, I don't know this for a
Unix
fact.
system.
It was a Btrieve site-based solution of
Okay.
Yardi. It was
Okay.
one of my jobs was every night the computers communicated, and I'd have to go and figure out give me an error report, and I have to go fix the errors, and then work with tech support on how to correct those things. But I really I was hired to be trainer of everything, so maintenance, leasing, managers, and in a way, I was also rewriting all of our policies and operational procedures. So I didn't know a lot of those positions. What I did is I would go spend like a week at a time at a property, and I would just walk in people's shoes, or I would fill roles if there was a vacancy. I'd act, just so I could learn the job, so I could write the training manuals. And so I wrote all of our training manuals. I did all of our training for all of our different staff. And then that kind of got me into leadership development. Marquette was an incredible, fertile ground for me to grow as a person, both professionally. They do a lot with personal development. Spent 9 years there, and again, God just kind of, I met my wife at a wedding in Dallas. Her coworker married a good friend of mine, and we stood up in the wedding together, and fell in love with her. Dated long distance for 3 years. She moved to Chicago to go to pharmacy school, and I went back and got my master's. Almost got my master's. I have everything but my capstones done for my master's, my MBA and master's in project management. I kind of ran out of time on the move to Lubbock and never went back and finished those two things. But I've taken all the different courses for them while she was going to pharmacy school. But when she got done, she really wanted to move back to Texas. And I didn't really. I don't know. There was talks about partner and stuff at Marquette, but it just never really materialized. So I'm like, yeah, okay. Came down to Lubbock on Christmas in 2003. We were at Broadway Church of Christ. My wife's mom and Paul Stell's mom played matchmaker. Paul had Stell and Young at the time, him and Charlie Young, and they were looking to grow, and they were looking for someone who could come in on the operational side of things. That's my forte. God connected us. 3 months later, I moved to Lubbock, Texas, and we started. At the time, it was Stellar. We converted Stell and Young to Stellar, and then Paul was building Vintage, and he really wanted to do more of that type of work. We wanted to stay in apartments. Still dear friends with Paul, and wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Paul, and think the world of him. But that about 2007 is when we kind of broke off, and Madera kind of went in and did our full multifamily thing, and Paul's gone and done the Stellar family company since.
Okay. So much there, and I can see myself, and I can see a lot of other entrepreneurs, business owners in this story of even today. The day we're looking at today, he's still like, I was a 2.7 GPA guy. You just kind of this mental image of yourself of I was never on site doing this stuff. And so I had to go out and ask these people how to do it. And just this self-image where, I don't think that story gets told enough of, so many people see, the confident, capable entrepreneur, but there's a lot going on between the ears. And some of that is good, can be good. There's a chip on your shoulder. You're kind of, you want to prove yourself, to your friends, to whomever. But I think that's always there.
Yeah. And that development process is different for everybody. And whenever you get to that point where you're ready to take the leap and do your own thing, which, I guess brings us to Madera, or at least that's when you first were a co-owner, right? And I'm very curious to know, you alluded to this identity crisis. that you felt like you had in the early success. What do you think your, identity was before the crisis? And then how did you grow out of that? And how did God help shape you into the person you are today?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, because your business becomes your identity. Your, decisions you make become a part of your identity. Like I let a lot of that kind of seep into my brain. Like I was successful. We're now starting to do, so I'm successful. That like, okay, what does that even mean? Like it doesn't really, dollars and cents don't create success. What does success mean for me? And what do I stand for? And, I was very codependent. I was very I worried what people thought. I still do to a certain extent. Like I care, but I don't let it be a part of who I am anymore. And so I had all this kind of crap in my brain that I was trying to sort through. And like I said, thank God God connected me with the right counselor who could really tap into allowing me to sort of express myself and what I thought. And I'll tell you, it wasn't easy. I mean, there were some miserable conversations. Like there were some things where it was like, he was forcing me to confront things about me that I didn't like. Yeah, I didn't like that. And once you can kind of get them out there, then you can kind of say, yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that version of Dave. I like that version of Dave. And then you start to like identify like, who am I really? And then, so for me, very long story around my faith, but by this point in time, I think a good way to start my faith was when I moved to Lubbock. Paul and Charlie, their first core value was Christ. Coming from Chicago, Detroit, I saw that, and the first thing that jumped into my head was liability. Like, we can't do that. We're gonna get sued. Like, somebody's not gonna like that about us. And to their, love them to death. They're like, yeah, I don't care. That's who we are. That's who we're gonna be. And for like probably 6 months, I wrestled with that idea. So this is 04, let's call it. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean to me? And really came to my senses and going, yeah, that's who I want to be. That's who I am. But we're still kind of dancing around the fringes. You get to a point where you're going through this identity crisis and you're finally really going to face some of those things and really try to figure them out. First thing I realized was like, I want to do kingdom work. I want to be a Christian. I want to be someone that listens to what God has to say and that he opens the door. And then I started thinking back and I'm like, remember that time driving under Telegraph Road, or that time when, something happened that there's no explanation for it other than God was pushing you gently in a particular direction. And I had a bunch of those. And so then you're like, you kind of get this excitement along, like, yeah, that's what God wants me to be. And then you come to peace with that. And it was probably a 2-year journey, 18-month, 2-year journey before I finally got to a place where I was like, I like where I'm going. I like where things are at. And then it gets really fun. Because once you have that figured out, once you have your values figured out, then you can really sit down and go, well, what's the vision? Where am I going to go? I remember I had this coach. This is a funny story. I had a coach in high school. So I ran, people are all look at me and they think I'm a football player. I was actually a cross country runner, a track runner, and a basketball player. Nobody could believe that. But there's a whole story behind that, but I was. And I ran the half mile in high school. And so freshman, sophomore, junior year, I could get down to be like a 205, 206 half mile guy. Which,
you're moving.
Was moving okay, especially for a big guy. That was the bit like, the wind was right and everything was good. I mean, I was probably typically like 208 to 210 guy, but I could get down to 205, 206. So I had this new coach come in my senior year and he goes, Dave, here's what I want you to do. I want you to run as fast as you can for the first quarter mile. I want you to leave it all out there in the first quarter mile. And then I want you to just hang on for the second quarter mile. And I'm like, okay, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. He's like, no, I'm serious. I'm like, he's like, this me. I want you to go, and I want you to go do that. And so I did. I do listen, and I do take direction fairly well. So I'm like, I'll try it, whatever. I ran like a 158, and you're just like, okay. So in my head, like I've been building on that idea ever since, like, okay, if we're going to do this, let's do this.
Let's go all out.
Let's go all out
at the beginning.
Let's think big. Let's cast a big vision. And if I fall a little short, it's still going to be bigger than anything I thought I'd get into.
I love that.
And so that has been sort of a little bit of a mantra. Now it drives people crazy about me. And I'm now aware of that. I'm now understanding of that. I'm now empathetic to that. But I think early on, people thought that I was just like, I just like doing deals. I just like to create, in my crazy brain, when we do something, it's connected to something else. And I'm trying to like, okay, I want to pull these pieces of this puzzle together, but people view that as you're off your rocker. You're getting into the electricity business. What are you doing with that? Or what are you doing with, acquiring a development company and really doing technology development? It's like, well, there is a story there. There is a reason behind it.
But you're at a point now where I think people have seen the success. And so do you feel like there's more trust whenever you have one of these, ideas that you think people in the past might have said was crazy?
We've gone through periods of success, no question. On the Madera side, we had about a 12-year run. But it's not like we're all in real estate, you're always tied to the market and how's the market doing. If the market's down, there's nothing I can do magically to make it work better. I'm going to pay a price for that. And right now we're in a very distressed market. 08, 09, when we first got into buying our own deals, very distressed market. And, they were painful, like remarkably painful. This time is really painful. I mean, it's hard to navigate these waters with the current economic front. But people still look at us and they go, but you're so successful. I'm like, it's a relative term. I mean, yes, we've had success. We've been extremely blessed. We've also had some really trying times. Technology side, if somebody could look at me and go, Dave, what really have you done? I mean, it's been 9 years. You guys aren't even profitable yet. You guys are, you're at about 50,000 units deployed on your smart apartment stuff. And it would be easy for someone who doesn't understand the full macro environment that we're living in and the potential that what's there to be able to say, dude, what are you doing? Throw up the flag. It's time to move on to a different place. And I'll tell you, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you better have thick skin and you better believe in what you're doing, because you're probably, unless you catch the right wave at the right time, you're probably going to go through some really challenging times. And I think we've gone through probably more than most when it comes to those things. But I couldn't feel more excited about the near and mid and long-term future of Quext.
Well, tell me, so you alluded to the 12-year run of success, 12-year run of just, what seems in hindsight like win after win after win. Is there a good story there that you can kind of paint a picture of what Madera is, what Madera does, that, was maybe an impactful win for you guys along that 12-year span?
Yeah. I mean, you could go in a lot of different directions. That's a good question, Albert. I think the market has a huge impact on what we do.
Right.
I mean, you're a real estate guy. You know this. We had 12 years of, we had really bad years from, call it 05, 06 through 2010. I mean, especially 8, 9, and 10 were brutal. Second half of 8, 9, and 10 were just awful. And it doesn't mean we weren't as smart as we are now. I mean, I had been doing property management for 20 some odd years. We just bought a deal. So I was learning a little bit what an owner meant versus, having to do, cover payroll when you don't have cash, and how you're going to do all these different things and, get real creative. And, I think that really helped me, in those crisis moments, allowed my entrepreneur spirit to come out and really help with my partners to really navigate some troubled waters. And then the market turned and, cap rates changed dramatically. They went up through the roof. Pricing was just, they were giving away deals. I mean, if I had a blank check back in 11 through, call it 15, I would have bought every single deal we touched, because it would have worked regardless of what we did. Mm-hmm. That said, we are very experienced. We've been through the ringers. We know a lot that we can now apply to be successful. But then when, we thought COVID was going to kill us, everybody was freaking out during COVID time. We didn't expect it was really the inflation that came after COVID and the impact on the treasury and interest rates, and how sudden that happened and really caught us off guard. I think it caught pretty much everybody off guard in some capacity. Story wise though, from a success, I really, I think for us, if you look at that time frame, we went from buying one deal in 08 to buying 3 deals, or two or three deals in 2010 to buying 4 or 5 deals in 2011. I think we learned that, if you're not growing, you're probably dying. And we weren't just growing to grow, but it was the right thing for us to do. And because of that whole mantra, like I was in a deal at lunch today, a video call with some really successful people, and some of them are getting close to retirement. And one of them brought up this idea of like, yeah, I tried this whole retirement thing, or at least dialing it back. It lasted about 6 weeks. I think as entrepreneurs, I don't think it just magically goes away either. I think that's just who you are.
Right.
And so you just need to accept the fact that that's who you're going to be, and you keep feeding that, as long as God provides you those opportunities.
Okay. When he's mentioning deals, like went from buying 1 deal to 3 to 8 to along that 12-year span, it's not like buying a house. We're talking apartment complexes that, are somewhere from the 10 to 20, $30 million range, that you're going in and they're valued. He alluded to cap rates, and we've mentioned that on the podcast before, but it's essentially a multiple of profit is what it is. And so, that multiple grew from 2009, 2010, really to 2021, that multiple increased. And so when he's talking about the market, you kind of could buy anything because that multiple on valuation kept increasing. And but the level of prolific success that Madera had, any real estate broker in DFW or Houston, when you talk about the last 10-year cycle, the major companies that added value, value add apartment guys, Madera is like right up there at the top of like the most prolific investors and operators of the last decade. And so when he says, we had some success, like they were, arguably top 3 value add guys in DFW in Houston in the last decade. And to hear Dave say, who am I? Who am I to have success? Who am I to, what do I do with that? Like that is like such a kick in the pants of like, man, from the onset, from the outset, you're like, I want to be that. I want to be like what those guys are doing, the team of guys, like how they all complement each other, this well-oiled machine from the outside that has built this empire.
Yes. And I appreciate, Dave, I appreciate your willingness to be open and the fact that it's not all roses either. And, we're talking about success, and the first thing that you want to bring in is that like sometimes the market does things that you have no control over, and the success of your business can rise and fall based on that. I think a lot of people who are listening today, business owners out there, they may not relate to, owning multifamily real estate or anything like that. But what you can relate to is this idea that you're giving us, that you got to know who you are first and foremost and operate with that, being secure in that. And especially as a Christian, I'm with you. My identity is rooted in God and in Christ. And from there, then I can get a clear vision of what I believe we can do. And if I really believe in that vision, I want to run as hard as I can for that first lap of the half mile. I want to shoot for the stars, and whatever the cheesy saying is, if you miss, whatever. Hopefully somebody out there knows what I'm talking about. But the point is, I think we fundamentally we need to have that sureness about us that we're aiming for the right things and we're going to see it through. And I guess we think about that with Madera. The next question I have, because we've alluded to your second business with Quext, and I'd like to hear just what Quext does. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Real quick though, what you just described is what I call delusional confidence. We have to be delusionally confident in what we do. And some people like, so you mean delusional? I'm like, no, it's important to understand there's the word confidence is in there too. It means that I truly believe in what I'm doing. And I think I'm doing it for the right reasons. Doesn't mean I always am. You learn along the way. You learn things you didn't know before. And I'll get to your question in a second. I just think it's really important to know too, Madera had, in layman terms, we had about 80 home runs to grand slam home runs in a row on the apartment side of things.
That'll make you feel good.
But now we're in the midst of losers, and you go from the penthouse to the outhouse literally overnight, and it keeps you up at night going, what could I have done differently? How do we literally like I'm sitting there, you're always stressing out about, okay, what are we not seeing? It was something we just couldn't foresee. And so now all of a sudden we've got some deals that are not returning our investor money like we thought they were going to do. And some things aren't happening the way that we anticipated back when we first originally did these deals. It's hard not to let that become your identity too.
Mm.
And I think that's like, it would be very easy for me to sit here and just wallow and throw my hands up in the air and say, okay, we had a good run of it. It's time to throw in the towel. Let's move on and just, put your head between your legs and apologize to everybody that you feel like you let down in that deal.
Right.
And you go through that period, you go through that stage, whether you like it or not, but you need to get to the point where it's like, I'm going to do something about that. Yeah. I can't change the past, but I can certainly change the future.
Yeah.
How do I go make things right? And if I can't do it with this deal, I'm going to do it with another deal. But like everybody that, I feel like I ever let down good, whether it was something that directly did or just bad luck, if you don't have that character and integrity that you want to go and make it right, this isn't the business for you either, because you're going to have especially from an entrepreneur, like Quext is a completely different beast. It's a technology company at a time when technology is growing exponentially. Moore's law is coming at such a rapid pace of technology doubling. If you're going to play in that space, you have to be on the forefront of it all. And with a lot of technology companies like ours, especially in real estate, our customers don't know, like you asked, what does Quext do? Well, right. In layman terms, like we provide a platform and an app that allows people to control their thermostats, their locks, their lights, their lots of different things, as well as we have managed Wi-Fi partners that provide the internet for the property owner. And we have a number of like SaaS related software solutions for multifamily, very specific.
Okay.
As a guy who's been managing apartments for 34 years, I guess, this year. These are things that as an operator, I'm like, technology can do this better. Technology can save us money. Technology can make us money. How do you bring that into our space? Sadly, as an industry, we aren't really in tune with what that means. So you're almost having to create a paradigm shift with your customer. Like, hey, we can do this, and this is going to save you all this money, or it's going to do all this stuff. And they look at you like, yeah, okay, prove it.
Sounds weird to them. They're just not used to this concept, right?
So our industry is notorious for, and I've been in it for so long, I can speak to this. Like, we're like, no. We're not like, this is how I've always done it. This is how I've always done it. This is how I've always done it. And then slowly you get some meaningful companies who will tap their toe in and then actually do it. And then there'll be some articles written. Then all of a sudden we'll go from absolutely not to FOMO, where they flip around and they're like kicking your door down. Like, I've got to get this technology. I think we're finally at that stage with Quext, with some of the things that we have going on right now. But man, 9 years.
That is a long time. But I feel like that's technology companies, people know the famous examples of like Uber and Amazon and those but I think one of the challenges that technology companies, especially like a new technology, a new idea for people, is that you have to do all of this education of your potential customer, and they're not going to adopt something until they understand it. So it sounds like you're describing you guys have had to kind of go through that. How do you address that problem of helping people understand what it is that you're trying to do?
Man, it's death by a million cuts. You have to do everything, so you see me doing podcasts, you see me speaking at conferences, I've got a lot of friends in the industry. It's me calling them up and talking with them, and it's constant and nonstop. But in today's environment, the big issue for the last 3 years is nobody's got any capital to go invest in their properties. They're just trying to keep the lights on because of the current state of the economy. And so we've been behind. I think if it was, pre-COVID, we'd be killing it right now because everybody had capital. Deals were flowing. There was transactions. Last 3 years have been just like stagnant. It's been miserable, and you have to live through it. Like a lot of our competitors are falling by the wayside. So, but you have to like put your head down and keep going until the timing's right, and then it takes off. But man, it's you have to spend a lot of time as an entrepreneur reinvigorating the team, re-inspiring the team, reminding the team of the vision, and fighting, and then I think how it's going to go. I've been on the board of some successful companies who hit the timing wave right. And so I came in early, got to see how this could work in a company that wasn't bound to the same issues we maybe have with capital needs and stuff like that. It could flip around really quickly where we're going to be struggling to keep up. And I hope we're there. I hope we're getting close to being there with some of the partnerships and stuff that we've got going.
Are you seeing some changes in those economic headwinds? Do you think things are starting to turn a little bit?
Yeah, they have to. They can't really go any other direction but up. I think we finally hit the bottom. I mean, I think you'll see. I'll say I think you'll see 150 basis points of cuts in the next 12 months. That'll be game changing for us as an industry. The other thing is it's funny. I'm nothing against my banker friends who are listening to this, but when you don't need money, bankers are like banging your door down. When you do, they turn on you 180 degrees. And I could spend
let them have it. Let them have it.
And I get it. I mean, they're like the banking industry's changed, and the regulators are the regulators. I'm in the banking business a little bit, so I understand the dynamics around it. But there's a lot of commercial real estate right now that's in trouble, just a ton of it. And either the lenders are going to have to be, open to, workouts on some deals. And I'm not talking Madera here. I have a lot of friends in the industry. Actually, I have had conversations with friends that like I would feel today that Madera's in a great place, even though I know we've got plenty of challenges to still overcome, but there are a lot of people in trouble. And I think something's got to give because time's run out. I mean, a lot of these loans are coming due and there's not going to be a workaround. And so either lenders are going to get real and want to like try to solve problems, or they're going to get a bunch of deals back and you're going to see a lot of fire sales going on. And I think you'll see a lot of transactions as we move into 26.
Okay. You mentioned how your brain works and how, you're doing all these different things that someone from the outside who's not in your brain is like, man, this guy has ADD and he's doing, 8 different businesses that are completely unrelated. And this is a place where I think our brains are a little similar. Like I enjoy building the mosaic of synergies all over the place. And so can you maybe talk to, what does Quext do for your real estate business and how are those synergies, in the best case, best world, what does that look like?
Yeah. That's interesting. The mosaic synergies. I like that phrase. I'm probably going to steal that from you because that's exactly what it is. Quext was built. So Madera is your sandbox. You go and you come up with ideas. Then you go and you create them in Quext and you go put them in Madera and you prove them out. And if they prove out from Madera, we're a multifamily shop. There's 25 million apartments across the U.S. and probably another 25 million of BTR, builder rent, single family rental that you can, see a massive market out there for you to apply it to. And, Quext, the efficiencies that we've created, the revenue drivers that we've created, the partnerships that we've got. I mean, it's been a journey, but man, we're in a really strong position right now to have a big 2026. But go back to your mosaic of synergies. It's interesting because I don't think people really understand me very well. I just talk with people and I listen to them ask me questions and do things. And I think there's just this general sense that I'm either ADD and I'm just a deal junkie and I just want to go create something new. Or I'm some sort of mad scientist that has this like super master plan. It's nowhere. It's somewhere in the middle of all that. I'm somebody that, I can connect dots in my head around synergies, and that's not just businesses, that's people. And I think that's worked in my favor tremendously. And I give God all the credit. I think he opens doors with people. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, okay. Like, I get it now. Like this person can come into this role and they can solve this problem and they can own that. And I'm just going to be working alongside of them and not own that piece of it. And we've been blessed with some really talented people to come work with us, both in Madera and Quext. I am somebody that, I do think things through. I do spend a lot of time, I tell people this because it's true. I'm a yes until I'm a no. That's how I approach everything. So when somebody comes with an idea or something, I'm like, yeah, okay, let's talk about that. If it, and then I stay a yes until we identify, no, that's not going to work. And I would say 95% of the time it turns into a no, maybe more, but it starts as a yes every time. And I think that freaks people out because as soon as they see me say yes once, they just assume it's going to happen. And I've had to explain to people, well, remember that deal, remember that deal, remember that deal. Like we didn't do those deals. You probably thought I was going to do those deals because I was interested in them. I was asking questions around, but I didn't do those deals. And there's a lot more of those than the ones. I mean, if you look at it, we are probably the makings of 6 or 7 companies. But I mean, I bet I've looked at 500 ideas to get to that.
I think that's a common trait of a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs is that openness to where things might go. And, we had an investment opportunity. Somebody approached us and it was obviously probably not going to be a good thing. And my wife turned to me and she said, well, what do you think? And I was like, what do you think I'm going to say? And she was like, you'll probably say you're open to it and you want to hear about it more. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, that's actually what I would say, even though it's probably going to turn into a no. But I think that's a good attitude to have because you never know. Sometimes the thing that sounded harebrained at first, you hear it out and you realize like, maybe this could turn into something cool. I'm
still really good friends with the no's, to be honest with you, because they appreciate the fact that I took the time to dig into it. And I'm not like I'm going to ghost you. No, I'm the guy who calls you up and says, okay, this is what I can't get over. I'm stuck here. I need to go in a different direction around it. And those, I think you get, I mean, one thing I will tell you about being a founder of a company and then being an entrepreneur, and you guys know this, it can be very lonely. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's finding kindred spirits. There are not a lot of people who like to play in this space. There's a ton of risk, and I get it. There's a ton of risk. The first sign of trouble, you gotta like put your head down. You can't run for the hills. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who are throwing their hands up and throwing the towel in and saying we're done. You just can't do that. You just got to keep fighting through it. And God's blessed me with some of those skill sets and characteristics to be able to overcome those things. But it does get lonely. And so as you find people like yourself who have these ideas, I think it's critical, even if it's just to like pay it forward, to spend the time to listen to them if you got the time to do so. Now, I do say no to a lot of people before I ever get to any kind of conversation. But if I get to a conversation, I want to at least give them the respect that they deserve to be like, okay, let me just tell you what I think. And unfortunately, I can't do anything, but what can I do to help you? And I think, that's how you build out a network that is synergistic. Even if they're not in your network yet, they might be in your network somewhere in the future. Yeah. Or they might know somebody who needs to be in your network. I can't tell how many times I've had that happen to me.
Which is cool.
I'll tell you a great guy, Cody Huggins. He's out of, I don't know, he's out of Austin. He's I think he's a partner at Scout Ventures. They do a lot of military investment, former Army Ranger. I was at his company in Austin on a yes looking. I was a yes, and I left the company as a no, but he sat through those meetings and he watched it and he reached out to me through LinkedIn like a few days later, like, hey, I just would like to have a few minutes just to talk to you. And he and I spent 30 minutes on a phone call. We've become really good friends. I can't tell you the people he's introduced me to. Wow. And hopefully vice versa. I think we both support each other. And it's great on Christmas when he sends me a Merry, he's one of these guys who's very thoughtful and does those things. And I wish I had that skill. I got to get better at that skill. But, that was a no. And I've never done any business with Cody, but yet he's still a dear friend right now.
That's awesome. And that's a good lesson for people out there,
You said this in many words, and I want to hear what a succinct answer is to this question. But when you make a lot of decisions without all the information, you don't have a crystal ball, you don't know what the economy is going to look like 7 years from now, and so you make a lot of decisions with incomplete information. And I think of a lot of our clients in the business coaching world, a lot of our clients on the business brokerage world that have trouble taking those calculated risks, making decisions when they don't have all the information. And so, do you have like how would you explain kind of your rules of thumb or maybe, your habits whenever you need to make a decision without all the information?
First of all, I'm going to say you can't, if you don't have somebody who's going to make a decision, you're not going to, there's no committees. There's benevolent dictatorships when it comes to running a company.
Yeah.
I've got 3 partners, and, where we get into challenges sometimes is there's this sort of democratic approach. We'd love for there to be a democratic approach to things. But there's too much going on, and people need to be able to make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taken a long time, and we've done a good job of getting to a point where we can trust each other when it comes to the decision making. And I'm a part of other groups with similar things. I'm just going to tell you, if you're a leader of a company, you've got to understand that that's your role to make a decision.
Yeah.
Because if you don't and you get paralysis, you might as well pitch up the tent, go home, because you won't be like in our world, there's a lot of things that require decisions with incomplete data. So take a step back from that, though. I'm a big fan of the 5 hats concept. So the black hat is I'm making a decision. I did this exercise with our team in Poland about a month and a half ago, and it was really kind of cool because they weren't expecting that. They thought I was coming in there to really kind of like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And I said, okay, I don't like making decisions. I'm glad to make a decision, but I'd rather this be something in which, I'm looking at a leadership team. I'm like, I think we should be making a lot of these decisions together. I think each of you has decisions that you need to make. I go, if it gets to me in my role as the leader of the company, then I'll put my black hat on, which means I'll make that decision. If we're at a fork in the road that says left or right, I'm glad to say we're going left. Mm-hmm. Knowing that if we feel like it's not going well left, we can always turn around and go back on the road on the right. So it's the other thing you have to remember is there are no decision you're going to make. Very few, if any. I don't know if I can't think of any. If I make this decision and it doesn't go well, the game is over. We're leaving it. But I think we think of all decisions in that way.
Like that, yeah.
Most of the time we're all wearing our purple hat, which is the brainstorming hat, where it's like the 3 of us could sit around a decision, and let's say I'm the leader and we're talking about something and we're throwing out ideas. Where we get stuck in the purple hat deal around brainstorming is we leave and no decisions are made. And so you have to remember at some point in time, somebody's got to put the black hat on and make that decision. I think that mantra, and if you can get comfortable with that idea, is a great way of building a culture where other people feel empowered to make decisions. Because I'll sit in a meeting, I'll be like, not my call. That's your call. And they'll look at me like, what do you mean? I'm like, that's what your role is in this company. I don't have the information that I need, but you do. And I realize you're scared to death of making a decision because you think if you make the wrong decision, I'm going to fire you. But I got to also have a culture in which you need to understand it's okay for us to make mistakes. So I told this leadership team, I'm like, we're going to make a bunch of mistakes. And I'll tell you, like most of my growth as a person, as a human being, has been when I made the worst mistakes of my life because I've learned from them and I've moved on and I've used that in my experience. So I need a culture in my organization where everybody feels like they're empowered to make a decision. Screw up, make a mistake, but fail fast, and then adjust from there. What you can't do is not make a decision. And so I think, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's kind of how I approach things is like, not all decisions can come through me. They have to be like the really big, hairy decisions. If it's me making a call, you have to have a culture in which not all that falls on you because you'll burn out in record time. Even just making the small number of decisions is going to be stressful enough. So you've got to be able to spread that around. And that's the only way you're going to be able to grow exponentially is if you've got a team who can work in that kind of environment because it's just going too fast.
Yeah. Well, if you had perfect, complete information, it's easy to make a decision, but knowing when you need to put on the black hat versus when you just need to empower somebody to put it on themselves. I mean, that's a great takeaway from what you just said. And I love that because as a business owner, knowing where the information lives, who can make the best decision because they're the owner of that department or process or whatever it might be, and not having the pride to always wear that hat, that's big.
Yeah. And so much of this is, are you really an entrepreneur? Because you mentioned it earlier, when as soon as you get punched in the mouth, are you going to turn around and run? Or are you going to put your head down and take the next step? Mm-hmm. And especially in times like today, where there's so much uncertainty, there's so much, blood in the water and businesses struggling and businesses worried about making payroll. And if you're not an entrepreneur, you're quitting. You're, how can I push stop and turn around and get out of this and go get a job? And those that are entrepreneurs, you have to keep fighting. You have to keep taking the next step forward. What's the next right thing to do? And when you talk about taking calculated risks, it's okay. I'm going to make the next right move. I'm zooming out. I'm looking at the big picture. I think this effort or this strategy, I think this is going to take our business to the next level. But I can't see 10 steps down the road. I can see 3, and I'm going to take the next one. And if that's the wrong step, okay.
We'll course correct.
Let's course correct and keep going.
Yeah.
And, that sounds rosy. And, it's a lot harder, you doubt yourself. Even the most accomplished people still doubt themselves, but that's just the man in the arena. We've talked about that over and over and over.
And that's where prayer comes into play.
Absolutely.
And I deal with, I hope people understand, like, I do question things, but then I go into prayer and I start to think through, is this where I'm supposed to be? Is this the direction I'm supposed to go? And as he does, he tends to open those doors for you, and you see him and you step through them. What you said, one thing I think is really important. And this is my personal experience. There are a number of people out there who think they're entrepreneurs because of their ability to maybe even start a company and have some success around it, who really aren't entrepreneurs. They're good business people. They're smart business people. But an entrepreneur is somebody who is really looking to, from where I'm sitting, like really revolutionize something, really make, like take a step of faith into a direction that is unknown. Going to recreate the wheel doesn't mean you're an entrepreneur. You just read a book and went to a class and got taught how to take a franchise and put a franchise to it. That's not an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur really, and I'll tell you, at times it's a blessing. I do find a lot of passion in it. You definitely can get a lot of accomplishment on it. Not as much as I wish. Sometimes it's a curse. I mean, like, it's hard not when things aren't going well, or you get a setback or something seems overwhelming in that space. There's a lot of times where it's you on an island. That's not always a fun deal. That's why I say it can get really lonely. That's why it's so important for having a strong family. And I mentioned I'm a God first person. I'm also Laura's husband, and I take that very seriously. I'm also Ben, Sam, and Will's dad. Like, those have to always rank higher than the work. And I can't say for me it was always that case. I think there's probably days where I come home and Laura doesn't think that I am putting her above what was going on at work that day. I know that for a fact, but I'm aware of that, and I make sure that I put my family and my faith first every time.
That's huge. And we've had so many interviews like this with the people who I respect the most that we have in this room, are the people who keep that perspective, because it's one thing to have great success or financial, windfall or whatever from what you do. But to me, there's lots of forms of wealth. And the highest to me is my relationship with God, my wife, my kids. And you know what? Those are first and foremost. And if the rest happens, then great. And I hope that people listening will understand that that's a perspective that's really going to lead to the true wealth that you want, that's going to bring you happiness in life.
Real quick on that, because I think it's important. Like, I think the real litmus test for that, can you sit there and say, if all the professional stuff went away tomorrow, if something happened and you gotta file for bankruptcy and you're done, is your relationship with God and your family in such that it really isn't that big of a deal?
Yeah.
And that's how it really needs to be for all of us. I know it doesn't feel that way. I know it's really hard to get there. I do think you get to a certain point with a certain level of experience, and you've asked yourself that question enough. And if your faith is strong, you can I can honestly say right now, if it all went away tomorrow, I still got my family, I've still got my friends, I've still got my relationship with God. Everything will be all right. We'll figure it out.
So much of what you were talking about when you were talking about an identity crisis, and that your identity was in your business. It was, if my business is doing great, I'm great. If my business is in the crapper, like I'm crap. And
well, it wasn't just business. It was a lot of things back then. Because I know you, like, I'm all of a sudden on the ladder for TAA, and like, oh, okay, that I'm now cool.
Right.
Like that really has, I wasn't doing it to be. At the time, I probably the level of prestige of wanting to be a part of that. But what I learned in, like, the volunteer side of things, because I've got to wear a number of volunteer leadership hats that I absolutely love. Like, I got to believe what I'm doing matters, and I'm having an impact on that. And it's really what I'm doing and who I'm doing it for. That's what's driving me, not some, I get to put something on my LinkedIn profile or my, that says I'm something or such.
Right.
Yeah. My point is my identity at that point in time, at the dark time, was a lot of just like earthly, worldly things. And it was just trying to get back on track and remembering like what I really believe in, what I really stand for.
And I feel like that's a struggle.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like, maybe as a man, like you want to be useful, you want to be impactful. And when, you've talked about your faith a lot, and, whenever my identity is in my work, is too much into my work, I've made that an idol.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And at the same time, like I want to be useful. Like what gifts and talents and resources and circumstance did God give me? And it's not to go, stand behind a pulpit and give a sermon. Like I'm terrible at that. I ramble way too much. But I feel like, we're uniquely gifted to be business owners, to grow things, to do things, and it's a tool. It is the talents that we were given that we're not supposed to bury. We're supposed to go invest those talents, and keeping a proper godly perspective of that, because if your identity is in that, like you're gonna crash and burn.
Mm-hmm.
You're going through those dark times. Like so many, I can think of so many of my friends and especially myself who have been through some dark times in the last 3 years. And if your identity is there, that is going to crush you. But if your identity is, I'm a Christian, I'm a husband, I'm a dad, and that sounds so like, cliche or whatever, but it's true, and the fruits that bears is stuff that good eulogies are written.
Yeah, and I think it's important for listeners to know, somebody who's been through this a few different times in my life. Being in the abyss is not a bad thing. Like it's, as long as you can recognize that you're in it, that's the first big step. But I'm a much better person going through those dark times than I don't know if I could have gotten there if I didn't. And I said it earlier, I think, that's where the growth occurs, is in those really uncomfortable moments. And
Mm-hmm.
the more uncomfortable, the more growth. What I have to be able to do when I get through it is look back and say, I'm not going back to that version of me. I didn't like that guy. And it's true. I didn't like that guy. That guy was an asshole, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
And it took some time for me to kind of work through that. And thank God that God opened that door for me to be able to do it in a way where I can look back and go, okay, now, do I have other things I'm going to have to work through? I guarantee it's going to come up. But if you're in the abyss right now, you can get through it, and you're going to be a better person when you do. And you just got to believe that.
We hear that repeated so often, this idea of the growth that you're looking for is in the thing you're avoiding.
Right.
And we do that naturally. It's just a tendency we have. And so that's a good thing for people out there listening to hear. I know we're getting close on time, so I want to end with this. What are you, as you look ahead to the next few years, what's on the horizon, whether it's Quext or Madera or something else, what gets you excited about the future?
I'm a techie guy now. I'm not really a very technically sound person, but I truly believe that technology is going to change how we live over the next 5 years. I think it's already doing it. I think we've just scratched the surface on what AI can do, but it's everything. It's quantum computing. It's crypto. It's, go through the list of just truly revolutionary technology. And I want to be somebody that is constantly looking for ways to be able to utilize those technologies and adapt them to how we operate in real estate. And I think there couldn't be a better time in our lives, across all, I think healthcare changes. I think we're all going to live longer, healthier lives. Now, we got to be aware it's technology, so it can turn into the devil just as fast.
Yeah, cut both ways.
It can cut both ways, but I couldn't be more excited about the exponential growth of technology today and what it's going to do for us and how we're going to live our lives.
Awesome. Well, I'm hopeful for that future.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
No, it's coming. It's here. It's the thing. It's here.
It's here. It is in it. That's one of those things that I know you listen to the All In podcast, and they talk about, what is AI? What is it really going to do? And AI really has a marketing and public relations problem, because they can't explain what that's going to look like. And I think companies like Quext, that you're like, okay, there's an app that is attached to your thermostat. There's sensors underneath the sink in your plumbing systems. It's connected to your locks. And, whenever you're not in your house, it's going to, see what is the most expensive electrical time in the day. And maybe it turns down your thermostat. Maybe it adjusts this. You have a leak underneath your sink, it's automatically going to shut something off, and there's, we're a little ways from parts of that, but it's coming.
Yeah.
And
we're there in a lot of that stuff. Funny story. And I hope I don't want to keep us too terribly much longer, but I was in DC a month or two ago and got to have drinks with a very popular U.S. legislator. I'm going to try to keep names out.
Yeah.
But I was asked by NAA and MHC to talk with them about artificial intelligence and what we're going to do to regulate it, because we need some guardrails around AI. And what was fascinating was the AI today is 70-30, polling 70-30 against today. 70% of the country is against AI, and they think it's going to steal their jobs, and it's a bad thing. And this person told me that they will not be introducing any bills until that flips. And they don't think anybody will, because you don't want to ever go and do something so like his challenge was, and he says he's having these conversations, is he's like, the AI industry needs to go spend $1 billion on public relations and change people's sentiment on artificial intelligence. And I think that's right. I think that's what's holding us back is we don't understand it. And so we get scared. If you do understand it, if you believe in it, like you just listed out, 4 or 5 use cases for artificial intelligence. There's an infinite number of use cases. Things that, this thing from a healthcare standpoint. We're going to start folding proteins, utilizing AI. We're inventing new drugs every day. Cancer, hopefully, and God willing, in our lifetime becomes something that is not nearly as impactful as it is today. And the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's exciting. And I'm glad that you're having those conversations. And it gets back to what we said earlier. The education piece with the new technology often is the hardest part to get adoption and to get to that future that the technology can help us have. But
all right. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you being our guest.
Thank you.
How do we send people your way to do business with you or get in touch with you?
I don't do social media other than LinkedIn. So LinkedIn's an easy one. Dave Marcinkowski is an easy one to find. There aren't too many of me out there. And then it's Dave at Madera Residential would be or onequext.com. Either one, you're going to get me.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Awesome, buddy. Appreciate it.
All right. If you are a business owner and you feel stuck in your business, you feel your business has plateaued and you don't know how to get to the next level, go to our website, stagcoaching.com, and in the upper right-hand corner, click to book your free consultation. And your free consultation will give you the next few steps you need to take your business to the next level. It's free and it's on our website, stagcoaching.com. Thank you. And we'll see you on the next one.